For this panel, we have a very distinguished set of speakers, starting from Amrita Ganguly, who is the Chief Diversity Officer at Tata Motors. She has over 2 decades of experience in media, corporates, and the social sector. We're very glad to have you. We then have Chitra from Shahi Exports. She leads the organizational development practice at Shahi Exports, has over 2 decades of experience across HR in the apparel industry, and she leads a lot of worker well-being programs and their implementation in garment factories. We then have Laura Macias from RISE. RISE is an initiative focused on promoting gender equality in global supply chains. She leads the Global Women's Advancement Practice at RISE. We finally have Arvind, who is the Associate Director of Design at Good Business Lab. He is a strategic thinker and an innovative designer focused on a vast variety of design projects, ranging from products, services, and programs. We're very glad to have all of you with us. Now, starting with the first question and getting right into it, to Chitra. As a large business, and for everyone's context here, Shahi has over 50 plus factories across India and employs a workforce of over 100,000 workers in their supply chains. As a large business, having 50 plus factories across the country, employing people from various backgrounds, how do you identify the areas of intervention and co-design worker well-being?
Thank you, Eshika, for this question, and congratulations, GBF team, for this event and also for inviting me. So what she asked just now, the question is all that what I do at Shahi is completely work on worker well-being initiatives. So she did mention about the Shahi is large organization employing people with different backgrounds, 100,000 workers. So I would say that Shahi itself is a country within a country. So the problems what you see in the society is what you see in Shahi. So the role of the worker well-being team, which is working, is mostly on behavior issues, building life skills, soft skills, social skills, which are very, very difficult, sensitive part of the business. So now when we talk about all those issues, and we cannot do programs or interventions just like focusing on business or just talking to workers, what we do is that it's a trust-based program. So when we talk about trust building program which are trust-based, because we have workers as a key center, our major initiatives are around human-centric design. So like Arvind is sitting here. So I've been talking to him for more than 6 years, or like in Shahi, he's part of the GBF team. We have worked design programs in Shahi, which are human-centric. So first what we see is that when we have a lot of issues inside the factories, plus we see issues outside the organization, in the community, we always have this question like which program or which are the issues we select first. So what we do is that first we write down the problem statement. What is the major problem what we have right now, and what will be the problem that the business would face maybe like another 3 years, 5 years. We also see some of the data what we get from brands. They visit factory and they also do some of the non-conformances. So we study all those data. We also talk to workers, and there are grievances, there are suggestions, there are complaints, which we also hear from workers. We also hear from management, from business. So looking at all this, first we arrive at the problem statement. Just to give an example, I can talk about the biggest problem what we see in our industry right now since few years is grievances, GBVH issues, or even talking about worker voice. So what we did was like, if that is a problem statement, the second important step is identifying different or difficult or different stakeholders. So we started talking to workers. We also started talking to research organizations. We talked to civic societies. We also talked to supervisors, management, the top management. And then we arrive at the program. We design a program which is human-centric, trust-based interventions. And that's how, like in Shahi, we have come up with the worker voice tool, which is called as Inache. At the end, we also look at what is the expected outcome. If the outcome deserves to be, reduce GBVH issues. So finally, we make it as a, the program which comes from the ground. It's not from the top, not from the mid. It mostly comes from the ground. And with all these important stakeholders, we ensure that we come up with the program. I can also add on, see some of the civic organization with whom Shahi has been working, like we have been working with FPAI, we have worked with Swasti, we have worked with International Organization for Migrations, we work with Janodaya, we work with a lot of civic society organization, plus with some of our projects are working with brands, and all these programs also have workers-centric. And apart from that, for the evaluation, we work with ICRW, and we are working with Good Business Lab. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that, Chitra. And I think all of us in the room would agree with the importance of collaborating with civil society organizations when it comes to driving action in the private sector. And that brings me to Laura. RISE works with global garment, footwear, and home textile supply chains across the world to promote gender equality. And you have a lot of global programs, but when you're working in local contexts, such as textile clusters in India, how do you adapt those programs to those contexts based on your collaboration with private sector organizations?
Sure. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you so much, Eshika, and thank you to Good Business Lab for the invitation. So I think that I would like to address this question from two perspectives. One is the adaptation to the local context, but also is to the adaptation to the world of work, understanding that some of the gender issues that we address are not only a problem in the world of work, right? Are also barriers that women face in the community level and in their household level. So let me give you a very concrete example of a project that we're doing right now with UN Women in Tamil Nadu for preventing and addressing gender-based violence and harassment in garment factories. So there, RISE is basically doing an intervention in factories where we do two things. The first one is that we do training to raise awareness around the issue of gender-based violence and violence against women, and also to raise knowledge around grievance mechanisms, remediation processes, and other strategies related to gender-based violence and harassment. And someone in the last panel was talking about how to change mindsets. We also do interventions on social norms, which are really, really key in terms of those changing mindsets. And then to answer to your question on how we adapt this program, so we partner with local partners to do the adaptation. We also partner with expert Indian consultants to do all the curricular adaptation, the program adaptation, and most importantly, we consult with women workers through a participatory needs assessment. And again, a very concrete example, through this process, we have brought to the project all the elements from the POSH Act that are very important and mandatory for workplaces here in India. So coming back to the point of the community level and the household level, this is the reason why we're also partnering with UN Women, because our expertise is in the workplace. We don't have expertise at the community level, but UN Women does. So what we're doing is that they are also doing an intervention with communities of workers in the hubs where factories are, so in those communities and in those households. And what we're going to do is that we're going to do a bit of a control group, not as exhaustive as the one that you do at Good Business Lab, but we're going to be having 5 factories, 3 factories where we're going to do the intervention in both the double intervention in the factory and also at the community level, and then another one where we're going to intervene only at the factory level. And then we're going to collect data and see what happens and see if this holistic approach where any international buyer or any supplier can come to us and do this holistic intervention right now makes any difference in terms of impact. And I will finish with this in terms of also answering to your question. This data will serve as a way also to adapt even more the program for a second phase. Thank you.
Great, thanks for sharing that example with us, Laura. And I think all of us would be keen to go through the results of the project that you're doing with UN Women in Tamil Nadu. Now shifting gears a little bit, we would agree that garment sector typically sees high women representation when it comes to the workforce, but there are other sectors that have low women participation as well, and we have Amrita from Tata Motors, and automotive as a sector traditionally has seen low women participation, although now there is so much action from the corporate side as well as the government side to increase that number, right? So really keen to understand your experience of using inclusion as a driver at Tata Motors, and also how you're designing DEI strategies as part of your role and bringing that transformation both at Tata Motors and ultimately the sector as well.
Thank you so much for the question, and good afternoon to everyone here. Thank you for making time. So just as a context, Tata Motors has two business verticals. There's the passenger vehicle business and the commercial vehicle business, which is trucks, buses, defense vehicles. And in the passenger vehicles, we have small vehicles like the Punch up to SUVs like the Harrier and the Safari. Why this context is, as Eshika mentioned, the sector hasn't been very friendly to diversity in general, especially on the count of gender. So I will talk about gender in the context on two levers. One would be a pilot that we did, and I would consider it a success if feedback is to be believed. So I'll talk about the pilot, and I'll also talk about the enterprise level, what were the interventions we did for the entire organization. So as a pilot, we encouraged our plants. So we have 8 plants across our passenger and commercial vehicle businesses across India, overseas as well, but I'm talking the Indian context right now. Where we encourage teams to create what we call as a 100% line, which means an assembly line that does end-to-end assembling of a vehicle. Can we look at creating a 100% women's line? Because there are the debate and the jury is still out on that one, that should you do a pilot that's all women, or should you do a mixed line which is more real, more everyday? My personal stand on that is that a pilot at least is a control sample. You can control the parameters, whether they are the compliances that require safety, home drops, how many shifts they can work, what kind of support they are given. So there's a control parameters are easier from a compliance point of view, and also from a safety and group movement point of view. Excuse me, it's easier because then you're working with a sample size that's relatively smaller, say a 1100, 1200 sample size. So a lot of learnings that happen in that pilot can be easily cross-replicated across the value chain. And to me, the success of especially the Harrier Safari SUV line, which was the first 100% women-run assembly line, not only in Tata Motors, but in the sector as well, which got us a lot of positive reinforcements that this should be done and can be done. And personally, it's a little too late in the day, but it still got done, right? So this pilot line and the learnings over here, if I can share it from a design perspective, there was a psychological aspect of telling the community, the women, that yes, you can do it. Like as Laura mentioned, there's a psychological aspect of bringing them into a workforce that's alien, that's not familiar. So we worked on that aspect. The second aspect is the hard skill training aspect. So we had a lot of training prior to the onboarding them that ensured a baseline expertise on the talent front. Subsequently, there's an ecosystem management. Then you create an ecosystem. One of the things I'm personally very proud of is the entire assembly line was ergonomically modified to suit the build and height of women. So whether it was with planks or whether it was with semi-automation, it created an environment because it should not be laborious for the women to work on these processes. So it became easier, and that to me was an investment that actually showed that the organization walked the talk. It's easy to bring in women, but not to give them the right work environment is again hygiene. And of course, washrooms, restrooms, all of that was provided. The creches were provided, medical supervision was provided. And then there is the growth piece. For me, these are the 4 levers. The growth piece is again something we heavily invested in. We run something called a Kaushalya program, which translates to a earn and learn kind of environment where you're already working with Tata Motors. We also assist you in getting higher education, training, certification, degrees, whatever you want, depending on where you are in your learning journey. We support financially, we allow time off, there is a lot of managerial support in getting that done. And when that gets done, you actually can come back to the organization and take on a supervisory role or a senior role. So that in a way makes sure there is a circularity to the talent that we are already grooming, right? So these are the 4 aspects on the pilot side. Quickly on the enterprise side, I think what was very, very important is that 3 points for me. The diversity agenda was leadership driven. That to me, and I come from an experience in media for 15 years, and I spent about 9 years in Tata Steel as well. Across my career of about 22 years, I have seen that diversity, a topic like diversity and inclusion, works extremely well when there is top level commitment. And at Tata Steel and at Tata Motors, the push came from the board and the leadership team. So that was definitely a distinguishing factor on why things got done as efficiently as it got done. The second piece was was a lot of adaptability that was encouraged from a cultural lens, where everyday language, posh awareness, everyday body language corrections that what you should do or not, or you shouldn't do in terms of conduct. Managers were trained on sensitization on unconscious biases, on understanding privilege, on understanding the additional the mental load that a woman brings to her work. And that sensitization was run very successfully by our own trainers that we were training in-house. So the sensitization that happened at an enterprise level was across the board, not just for the pilot team. And finally, a lot of focus was put in a focused manner for progression, promotion, development, to look at the attrition factor. Because all of you know that you invest in a cohort, you groom them, you build them, and when for whatever reason they are unable to continue with you for personal or professional reason, it's always a sense of loss more than the monetary loss, right? So the stickiness with your organization, the stickiness with your brand ethos or your employee value proposition as we call it, has to be very, very sound for that employee to say, hey, no matter what the temptation outside, I'm going to stay on. So a lot of work was done at an enterprise level on that aspect as well. So I think the idea was to create inclusion both psychologically as a lived cultural experience and in terms of representation with numbers. Today we have, and I'm close with this comment, we have 4 all-women's line in Tata Motors, apart from the one I spoke about, which is the Harrier Safari line, which incidentally also has the highest safety standard in India today. So a bit of information for all of you all to consider a Harrier Safari for yourselves. And what also I find extremely, or something I'm proud of, are commercial vehicle lines. And you can imagine the trucks and the size of the wheels themselves. To see these extremely petite women nonchalantly working with the motor, with the nuts and bolts or with the equipment. And we have 100% line in Jamshedpur plant called the Durga line, and we have something called the trim line in Lucknow plant as well. Every time I go there, there's this immense sense of pride that this was something that we were told that it can't be done till you actually do it and make it happen in a holistic manner. And there's one piece on inclusion that is, if you can find this film online, please look it up. It's a video on the Harrier Safari line, and it talks about the journey of the several women that are part of that line. And there's one girl who says in Hindi, and there's a translation as well, that I want to own the car I have built. And this is a girl from a village. And even when I talk about it after, I must have seen this about 3 years back, I still get gooseflesh because that's a kind of aspiration that we were able to instill in these girls who were probably told your life is marriage and children. So that's it from my side for this.
Great, thanks for that, Amrita. That's really inspiring, and I think it speaks to the legacy of Tata Group as well. And in our project that's focused on improving women's advancement in the auto sector, we're very keen to study these innovative models that Tata Group is also focusing on. Speaking of pilots, coming to Arvind, at GBL we employ human-centered design thinking methodologies to co-create interventions with manufacturing companies by engaging with workers and management. Can you speak a little bit about the process and how GBL also focuses on building a trust-based relationship with business stakeholders?
Amrita, thank you for that. So I'll focus on what leads to that success that Amrita was talking about, right? So in this grand developmental narrative, where does design fits, right? So design focuses on very micro aspects of lived realities of workers. So we use simple tools like a day in the life of a worker. We try to imagine how exactly a particular program is going to change that day, and so on, right? So this is where we start. Uh, Talking about process now, I quote this when I teach design for the design students. So suppose a client comes to you and they ask you, okay, I want a horse, or I need a horse. The default response would be you will go to the market, you will come up with 3-4 options and just sell them the horse, right? But that's not how design works. You need to understand their later needs. You were talking about safety, right? So what are the attributes of safety? What safety means to women? Usually when we talk about safety, we just discuss this during the break, commute related problems that women face. But at workplace, the ergonomics related problems that you solve, right? I guess that needs to be addressed by speaking with the workers, and that's what we do. So the process is you interact with the client, you try to understand what exactly they are looking for, and then you realize, okay, they are not looking for a horse, they are looking for a mobility solution. They need something that can take them from place A to place B. Then you try to understand what all resources they have. Then you come up with multiple options like bicycle, it can be bike, and any other mobility solution. Then you apply the constraint framework, okay? Within what constraint this business is operating, or your client or customer is operating. And then you finalize, okay, this person needs a bicycle, and then you apply human-centric design by studying their like anthropometric data, maybe how exactly that solution can be personalized or humanized, right? So this is how the process looks like to lead to what Amrita just said. And we have used this method in multiple programs, and I would like to quote something from that Chitra was mentioning, right? So when we were designing this grievance management tool for workers like 5-6 years back, right? The major focus area over here was how exactly women react or respond in a conflict situation. Popular psychology theories, they say that humans have flight or fight responses, right? But women freeze sometimes, right? So how exactly you can create that warm place so that they can reach out to the HR, right? So we designed processes that can encourage women to reach out to the HR person to ensure that we are creating that psychological safety on the shop floor itself, right? So that this is how the process looks like. Talking about trust now, okay, I'm obsessed with talking like breaking down word in multiple parts. So what are the attributes of trust, right? So it's transparent. You have shared value when you are trusting someone. Then what else can? Okay, let us go ahead with these two. So I feel the objective of any good design should be to minimize the learning curve, right? To address the frictions that your users might be facing, right? And we are using this in the program that Megha talked about in the previous panel, Women in Automotive Sector. So what we are doing here now, in current context, designers are talking about incremental innovation, but it was there in the automotive sector. They used to call it Kaizen, continuous improvement, right? They have success mechanisms also. So instead of inventing new terminologies, how exactly we can contextualize our findings in the existing vocabulary, that is the key for trust-based design.
Yeah, thanks Arvind for that. And I think at GBL we've extensively used this methodology, but we also recognize that good design does not guarantee successful pilots when it comes to implementation. And that's when I want to come to you, Chitra, to get some insight on how you've navigated such situations while implementing programs, even programs that have had a very strong design focus, where you've spent months co-creating those programs, and what are some challenges that you faced during the process as well?
To Arvind, where he was talking about design thinking phase. So we did programs in Shahi, like I would just take an example of Migration Support Center. So it was OD and GBL, we sat together, we also spoke to workers. There were worker surveys, then we spoke to NGO, like management, all different stakeholders designed the excellent program. We also have brands partnering. All was well and good. And we also thought that there will be one more partner from external, like maybe government, but that was also a part of it. But the challenge was like you have a very good, well-designed program, but government joined as a final partner, to actually implement the migration support center. The problem that came was that government had their own set of principle, their own like flow, like they had their own due diligence. They wanted it the way they want. Then we have a design thing, like we thought so well, and we have something in our hand, which we want to implement. So this was like one of the big challenge, like, how we make a cusp of like, already a well thought program, and then you have a difficult stakeholder like, the government, who wants it in that way to be a part of it. Then we have to go back and work together and look for ways, In the meantime, we lost a lot of time. So where we were supposed to implement maybe like, 3 months back, it actually took a year for us actually to come to, like design and implement. Second big, another problem what we also see is, like I was talking to somebody from Richa a few minutes back, that, we have good programs, we have, everything, like even thought of trainers in the factory, all that. But another challenge what we also see is the cost. So for our organization, we think like, okay, I want to work with GBL, but what is the research cost of it? So can I afford it? So sometimes, though we have cost, but, as you do the program, you also see recurring costs. It also becomes very difficult, to implement immediately, or it may take several months, or it may really push the program. Another challenge we see is that you have a best program, but for implementation, you need good trainers, good resources. If you fail to have a good resource and somebody who is leaving in mid of the project, you see that, the program what you have designed, you will not get the end result what you have thought, should be in the shop floor. Then we also see that like, okay, the program is good and we are implementing it, and then you have like a new program, or a new issue which has come in the society, and then you see the same thing in the business, and then you feel that, should I implement? And there are a lot of people talking about it, like, this program is good, but may not hold good now. So then, we have to rework. Maybe we take a time of 1 year, 2 year, or rework the entire design of the program. So basically, there needs to be resources for this. We also, need good team members, good project lead to implement the program. We also need, communication team. We have a strong communication team in Shahi to speak about the work, what we do, disseminate the information, what we do, centrally to the shop floor, to workers, to management, even to the top. Like Anant is part of OD team, and he has been helping us a lot, to take all the ground level information to the top. So that's how, and along with that, I should also mention Good Business Lab. A lot of, impact evaluation. When we talk about, we have a program, but, if somebody is giving us scientific data, and, if we are able to present that to production team, even talk to workers and tell them that, look, this program is shown this benefits, and we also talk to them, and also somebody talking the same data to management, it has helped us to scale the project as well. Thank you, Eshika.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Chitra. And just building on that point, on implementing programs and navigating these challenges, we would agree that change management plays a very critical role in that. And in your role, Amrita, you've designed many of these change management strategies for driving diversity and inclusion in the workforce. And I'm also curious how you've used communication as a tool, given your experience, for driving these change management processes. So would love to get your insight on that.
So just a tiny correction in that, at Tata Steel, I drove change management for more organizational behavior. And I am relatively new at Tata Motors, so a lot of the work that I spoke about is with due credit to my predecessors. But yes, taking it forward is a lot of excitement and passion for me right now. The example I would like to cite for change management and how to create a cascade is from my previous role at Tata Steel, where we wanted to create a very aspirational brand which was in need of the hour. So we did a Nielsen study in about 2017, and the brand feedback that we got was very high score on CSR, on ethics, on traditional legacy equity, that this is a good brand, respected brand. But we didn't feature anywhere on agility, on technology, on innovation. And the irony was the company was doing some fantastic work on innovation and technology, but as it is with usually with Tata brands, they don't like to talk about it. And when you don't talk about something, it doesn't register with your stakeholders. And suddenly time has gone, and while you're very proud of your legacy, people don't know that you're not just a 100-year-old brand, you're actually the first startup of the country. And that mindset is still preserved in your organization. So you have lost that connect. So in change management, from a diversity filter, I mean, I'm just giving you this example because it also applies, and that's exactly what I'm doing at Motors right now. The way I designed the change management process was we tried to create a short-term and long-term objective, of course. The idea was to create the archetype we want to become. So we gave a humanized persona to who Tata Steel is going to become. And there was a name, there was personality, there was a lot of softer aspects to the brand, including the fact that we were not a suit attired, pot-bellied, middle-aged man. So we categorically said we are not that. When we built that persona of the organization, the next level was to go top-down. That's again a critical insight because a lot of leadership behavior mimetically drives the culture down to the bottom of the pyramid, in a manner of speaking. So we did an extensive in-person training, coaching with the top leadership, which would be the top 3 tiers. And where the purpose of that change was underlined with a lot of business connect. So I think that's a key takeaway, that in diversity also I consciously bring in a business benefit, a use case for business when I talk about diversity with the leadership, because if you don't have that hook, it's not likely to stick. So that's something that I do consciously. The next level was to make the middle management on board. With middle management, historically, a lot of L&D was brought in at Motors and at Steel both, where we onboarded a lot of content that helped them, in the earlier case of Tata Steel, understand agility, and in Tata Motors understand sensitization towards diversity. So, and this is a necessary part. It was also tracked on their performance. So there's something called a manager next dashboard that on a daily basis, real-time basis, captures how many sensitizations you have been a part of, what's your diversity ratio of your team, how many of those people have you rotated, progressed, promoted, are their individual development plans ready, how many of your teams have applied for internal job postings. All those parameters, we use the Power BI tool. So all of it, so technology had a big role to play, and we made sure that the dashboard was syndicated across leadership and pain points were visible. So it was not so much to expose the laggards, but it was to assist the laggards, that we could move forward uniformly in the organization. And the last piece, which is the absolute, I would call them the beneficiary in this case, but the mass of the employees, I felt communication had a giant role to play. So we had a lot of fun in Tata Steel and in Tata Motors. We continue to do so. We make the subject relatable and fun, practicable. So for me, one of the most popular queries was when we were driving diversity back in Steel, a lot of senior colleagues said, this A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I don't understand. I said, sorry, what? And I said, then they were talking about the LGBTQAI+. And we think LGTV. I said, no, not LGTV, So there's a need to understand the vocabulary of change as well. And there were a few people who put up their hand and said, hey, I don't understand this. So instead of, saying, come on, be up with the times and, you need to know this thing, we made it easier for them to access that information and grasp it from both a self-learning pathway and a communication pathway. So we did vocabulary campaigns, we did easy e-learning tools. So that piece worked extremely well in galvanizing the overall culture of the organization in a manner that there was an acceptance on the subject, on agility in Tata Steel and diversity in Tata Motors. And what also worked for us is that we took a lot of pride in accolades, which meant that people who were doing well, so all our trainers who have done more than 5 programs, are commended in front of the leadership team. All the people, all the teams who have got high rating in their dashboard from the diversity candidates in their team. I don't like that phrase, but that's what we use. Anybody who was rated highly by their mixed teams were also commended. So R&R kind of works as a positive reinforcement of a culture you're trying to build. And if you have to measure this development in a numeric, measurable way, I can talk about Tata Steel because we are still in process at Tata Motors. Tata Steel had a 75% shift in perspective in 4 years flat. So when we did the Nielsen study again, 75% of the opinion has shifted in the direction where we wanted across stakeholders, internal and external, which I thought was fabulous. But that design is a use case, a case study I usually use when I'm teaching. So I'm sharing that with you because I'm using the same approach for diversity at Tata Motors as well. There is a leadership buy-in that needs to be very visceral. It has to be felt. There is a use of technology that needs to keep your data in front of you. There's a middle management that's usually the toughest to push in terms of behavioral change, so you focus on the psychological aspect. And then there is the participatory crowd that needs to be your cheerleaders, your advocates, and that's where you kind of engage the entire ecosystem in moving from point A to point B. And the satisfaction there for any change to happen is, of course, external validation, though we don't work for it. But just recently, Ambition Box came to our office and rewarded us as the nominated organization for the best DEI work practices in overall organizations, big, large-scale organizations, and in the auto sector. We have received a recent study that Kantar did for Storyboard 18, cited Tata Motors in the realms of Google's and Amazon's in terms of DEI practices. Now, external validation is good, but it's not what drives us. What drives me personally is to come to office and every day and know that this would be a good place for my daughter to work when she comes into the sector to work. And that's the paying forward we all are doing to ensure that these workplaces are more equitable for the genders, and I'm using genders consciously, that are coming in the future. Don't accept the status quo. Don't accept process just because it's happened for a long time. Each one of you, to my mind, is a change maker and a chief diversity officer. Go ahead and play that card. Because think of the next generation and are we leaving equitable, inclusive space for them to work. And that to me is the satisfaction I get from my job.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that, Amrita. I think one of the key themes that we're seeing coming out of this panel is definitely the importance of communication. And the second one is stakeholder collaboration. So I'm coming to Laura to talk about stakeholder engagement. RISE works with numerous brands, suppliers, grassroots organizations to bring them together and promote gender equality in supply chains. How do you bring these different stakeholders in a room? What do you think are the key characteristics of a constructive dialogue? And I do want to be conscious of time. We're left with 10 minutes, so we should definitely close up soon and move to audience Q&A as well.
Sure. I'm going to bring another example of what we're doing on our work on women's advancement and leadership. And also, we follow a very similar design process as what Arvind was describing. So that's great to hear. So I'm going to be presenting a little bit about this program in a later session. So I'm going to expand more on the methodology here, which I won't have the opportunity to do during the session. So we, 1.5 years ago at RISE, we started asking a question on how we could work on women's advancement and leadership in the garment industry. And the starting point, well, it's an obvious starting point, was by asking women workers what advancement and leadership means to them. And for that, we created a sort of methodologies with Colors Consulting, which is a local partner, designing journey maps, storytelling tools to ask that question to women. And then after that, we convene those results to a group of 50 stakeholders, industry stakeholders from women's organizations to international buyers to suppliers. And what we found is that there's a big mismatch between what women define as advancement and leadership and what the industry is now offering for women in terms of advancement. So we said, well, designing a program on this current situation might not be the best decision. So we decided to co-design a roadmap with all these stakeholders so we could all align in the same narrative and that we all had a common understanding of what advancement and leadership means to women in the garment industry. So for that, we ran a couple of futures workshops and system thinking workshops in collaboration with Forum for the Future, Good Business Lab, and Conciliary in Bangladesh. We did it both in Delhi and in Dhaka and globally last May. And through those workshops, we brought all these stakeholders, more than 80 stakeholders, into the table to discuss women's advancement and leadership and what could be alternative pathways for women in the industry. For me, it was a very enriching experience. I think many of you, I don't see very well, we have a lot of light here, but many of you were present during those workshops. And I think it was just the evidence that through a well-created methodology, stakeholders that don't often interact between each other, or that they interact with very different approaches to the same problem, can find a common ground and a common understanding to interventions. We finished those workshops with very concrete interventions of what women's advancement and leadership can look like in the garment sector. So that for us was a wonderful outcome. And it's just the evidence again that dialogue and creating a concrete product with the feedback from the end users and the interaction with all the stakeholders is really important as part of the process. So now we have the drafted roadmap, and I will make a little bit of promotion for the next session, and I will be presented that final product in the next session.
Yeah, definitely. We all are looking forward to that after lunch. Final question to Arvind. In addition to stakeholder engagement for design, what role does data play in informing the design of products, services, and programs?
So for a long time in my design practice, my design was informed based on anecdotal evidences. Like I saw a problem and I want to improve that product or come up with some solution, right? But I happened to work on this interesting project with UNFPA where we had huge amount of data. Essentially, the data was about 6-7 healthcare programs for women and how exactly it affects their productivity and so on, right? So what to do with this data, right? So collectively we decided to develop a return on investment calculation tool, a digital product that can help manufacturers across the globe to calculate how exactly some investment in women's well-being programs can translate into business outcomes. So what we did over there. So our research team, they studied all this existing data. They came up with an algorithm. And now the challenge for design team was within the manufacturing industry, each manufacturer or manufacturing segments, they have different means of calculating productivity, right? The inventory management mechanisms are different, productivity measurements are different, and so on, right? So we revisited that data and we try to identify what all patterns are emerging and how exactly we can generalize those patterns across different industry domains. And we designed this tool with the help of UNFPA, with the support from UNFPA. And essentially this tool is helping manufacturers in calculating return on investment. And you can do this for automotive sector, process industries. The centerpiece was garment industries because that was their interest. And now in future, we want to use this tool to calculate return on investment in other industry domains like coffee plantation, for example, right? Where it's very difficult to calculate productivity, right? So that's what we are doing. And what we are gonna do with this data in future, right? How exactly this repository can be used to inform larger policy level discussions or regulatory discussions, right? So this is how I am very fascinated with this because for a long time, I did not consider data as a useful resource as a creative person, but in this project, we utilize it and we achieve phenomenal success in this particular project.
Great, thanks for sharing that. Before we move to audience questions, I want to do a very quick rapid fire with all the panelists here. We just need 1 or 2 word answers from everyone here. And the question really is, if you want the audience to take away 5 or 6 characteristics of a well-designed program, what are those? So perhaps we start with Arvind, because he's a design thinker on this panel. 2 characteristics for a well-designed program.
One is I'm obsessed with co-creation, co-design, so yeah, for sure. Second thing, the successful products give you the sense of ownership, right? What is the equivalent for programs over here? So sense of belongingness is a key attribute of a successful program or a well-designed program. The participants or the workers, they should feel that, okay, I'm a part of this larger narrative, and that ensures the success or longevity of the program.
Okay, Laura, 2 characteristics from you for a well-designed program.
Well, the first one is, in our case, women workers at the center of any conversation. So all workers at the center of the conversation. And the second one is think that the impossible is possible.
Great, that's inspiring.
Yeah.
Chitra.
So for me, it is like it should be personalized, homegrown. So nothing, I mean, though it is coming from the West, it should be, again, it should come back to the factory, talk to workers and all that. So it should be personalized. And next is networked collaboration. You know, that's a major thing.
Great.
So difficult to add something after everybody has spoken. I would perhaps say that a business buy-in is critical. It's one of the mistakes we make when we design programs from an HR lens or an L&D lens, is that we don't get business buy-in. So I always say it's business owned and assisted by HR. That's one maneuver that I would recommend. And the second one is something that we need to change culturally, is the empathy quotient. I think it's all right to run a program, it's all right to make it measurable, but there is something that has been historically ignored across the board for women, is our systems were designed traditionally for the white male with a homemaker at home. And that entire process of productivity, appraisal, growth has been copy-pasted in India. We haven't really revisited a work ecosystem which accommodates different genders. And to me, why I'm saying empathy is that empathy what will make us pause and revisit that. So empathy and the business buy-in, please.
Definitely. Thanks for that. I think you all have helped me do my job of summarizing the takeaways for this panel. We only have 5 minutes, so we can take perhaps 2 audience questions.
Good afternoon. This is Swati. I'm from United Nations Population Fund, and thank you for this fantastic panel discussion. So, Amrita, one comment and one question. The comment is that initiatives like these women-led assembly lines play a very critical role in influencing customer perceptions and shift loyalties towards brands like Tata. So, I believe they need to be talked more about across platforms and forums. I, for one, wasn't aware. That's one. Question to you is, in terms of any specific challenges that you encountered in ensuring that the assembly line is led by women, and were you able to really look at the impact on the bottom line, and how does Tata really intend to sustain the momentum that you have garnered through this initiative? Thank you.
So thank you for the pointer, and I completely advocate that we need to talk more about it. But to let you in, the project didn't really help us initially in the bottom line. I want to be transparent because that is what it was, that it didn't help us, but it helped the brand equity a lot. And I'm sure it's a slow churn, but it will get there, that it will be a product of choice because of the interventions that we do. On the second piece, I feel, the challenge, the major challenge was the mindset shift. Telling people that this can be done from their homes, from the women themselves. Because we have been told historically for too long that tumse ye na ho paega, you can't do this, right? So that was a challenge. But what I feel is something that the company has upped its game, is that we now actively are working on mixed lines. And mixed lines is another beast altogether, because, if there's a short person and a tall person, you now need an adaptive plan that can work for the short person and the tall person, right? Just an example, because a mixed line is a complex project. But I think what it showed me as someone who has to enable this, the company had its appetite whetted. It's ready to take on that challenge and say, you know, we are going to do mixed lines. In fact, I also get feedback from the business saying, Madam, let's do this in the toughest lines, like commercial sales, where we don't see women. Let's do it in the foundry, which actually deals with heat and not the assembly line. Let's do it there and show ki we can do it. That attitude shift to me comes from the fact that the toughest bit was the psychological shift. And once you crack it, it's a self-churning process then. So hopefully, you know, we'll reap from that momentum soon. So that's where we are.
Okay, thanks for that. Any other questions from the audience?
Hi, thank you. This is for Laura or Arvind. Both the panels kind of got me thinking, and this is a problem I've been thinking a lot, which is when you say shared value creation and co-designing with stakeholders, the examples given were all industries that are bounded, like which means the workers are their employees. And now we are working with a gig economy where the workers are not employees but are labeled partners. Where do you start to create a shared value in such setups? Any thoughts on that?
I don't have a right answer to that.
There is no right or
but,
wrong.
yeah.
We all agree.
But the nature of transaction between these two stakeholders, right? When you term someone as partner, structurally you are taking away their benefits as workers, right? So I feel some work needs to be done on that front. I haven't engaged directly with the gig economy workers, but we have started doing some secondary work. We are trying to engage with a couple of platform economy players. So maybe after 3 months, I'll be in a position to answer your question, but that was a very good question, I feel, yeah.
Yeah, just to add that, I don't know if this is going to be very popular, what I'm going to say, but it might be also a problematic way of looking at workers. And I think unions and women's organizations need to be part of this conversation because workers are right holders and those rights need to be respected and fulfilled and remediate when needed. So it's really important that we are conscious of the language that we're using. However, I do have an example on how to share value across the garment supply chain, and this has nothing to do with what I have discussed today, but a few years I worked in a circularity project to understand how circularity, the new model in the garment industry, can bring value to workers. And we were discussing if you're going to sell a product in the market that is going to be resell, I don't know, 100 times or 10 times in the market, how is that being represented in the wages of workers, right? Because they produce the product one time, but you're selling the product 10, 15 times. So it's kind of a royalty type of model where you can introduce that circularity piece also into their wages and ensure that that way you raise that income that is really key for their livelihoods. But again, don't want to call them value creation, I don't know what was the word that you used. It's really important that we acknowledge that workers are right holders, and as such, legislation and a lot of things fall into that discussion and that language that we use.